Hello and welcome back to the Overdue Sports Show, episode 2 of the Overdue Sports Show. I'm Jake Sawinski, as always accompanied by Will Massa. How we doing today, Will?
Just another day, and we get to dive into some fun topics that we spent a really long time fleshing out pre-show. So I'm excited to kind of dive in and share our thoughts and strong opinions on some of these things. But we can just get right into it.
As am I, my friend. But before we do, our plan is to, going forward, we're going to release shows on Wednesday morning. So I don't know if we're going to record on a Friday night or a Sunday afternoon or a Tuesday night. Hell, even a Wednesday morning. We're not really sure, but going forward, we're going to try to have these out to you Wednesday morning. So without further ado, we're going to have a pretty baseball heavy show just because Hall of Fame voting was Monday, I believe. Monday or Tuesday. I'm not sure exactly what day it was. You can correct me if it was Monday or Tuesday, Will. But we're going to spend a lot of the time of the show talking about that. But before we do get into the Baseball Hall of Fame discussion, we're going to just briefly cover some of the NFL coaching changes that have happened in the last couple of days. The first show, we did mention that Ben Johnson went to the Bears and Mike Vrabel went to the Patriots. But we've got a hire that is near and dear to Will's heart. Aaron Glenn, former DC of the Detroit Lions, is now a New York Football Jet. So take it away, Will.
I have mixed feelings about this. I actually like the hire as a coach. I think he did a really good job in Detroit over the last couple of years, and I think it was a good decision. But they're following the same trope that they have for the last, I don't know, entire lifetime of mine, where they keep hiring head coaches with a defensive focus, which isn't an inherently bad thing, but the defense has never been the problems. And in my entire Jets fandom life, the defense has really never, ever been an issue. It's scoring. And the defense becomes an issue because they can't score, and the defense spends 40 minutes on the field making the defense ass. So for them to hire another defensive-minded coach doesn't give me a whole lot of confidence, because the offensive coordinator, while he was quote-unquote demoted last year in Nathaniel Hackett to Aaron Rodgers' personal assistant, the offense still stinks from that standpoint, not in a talent way, because it's one of the more talented units. You have a fantastic wide receiver one. You have a great running back tandem in Breece Hall and Braylon Allen. And you've got pieces around him. And, you had a good enough tight end. The O-line sucks. You have to address that. It's been the elephant in the room for the last, 8 years. You have to fix that. But the defense has never been the problem. So to bring in another coach that's going to emphasize defense, it just feels like they're running in circles. Like they're doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. I would have liked to see them try and hire somebody with an offensive mind, at least a little bit more so. And I think Glenn is going to do a really good job with the defense. He played that aggressive defense style, almost like the Rex Ryan era kind of defense, that, get dirty kind of thing, which I like personally. I think it makes for a fun brand of football, but it doesn't solve any questions on the offense. And while I think Aaron Rodgers is gone, and a lot of press conferences from the front office and from Aaron Glenn have kind of alluded to the fact that they would be surprised if Aaron Rodgers is back next year. Fingers crossed that he's not. You still have to address the quarterback issue. And they don't have a high enough. I don't like the quarterback draft this year. I don't want to see them draft a quarterback, especially at their position. I believe they're around the 10th spot, maybe 8. There's not going to be somebody worth taking at that spot. I don't want them to reach. I'd rather them trade down for more capital and try and build up the O-line a little bit, and then go to free agency for a quarterback. Honestly, if I had my pick, I would take Justin Fields in free agency. I don't want Sam Darnold back. I think you're going to overpay for, I think he showed his true colors in the back half of the year. And I think Justin Fields is good enough for a year until you can get somebody behind him that is actually solid. So that's what I would like to see them do. I don't hate this coaching hire. I just don't understand this consistent trend of bringing in defensive-minded coach for a team that has done nothing but struggle on offense for God knows how long, 15 years.
Right. I would say we were kind of talking about this a little bit pre-show. Like their situation is very comparable to the Bears, right? Like you've had a history of defensive-minded coaches outside of like Matt Nagy and now Ben Johnson, but you have a rookie quarterback where you need to, make the offense more efficient, and that will, pay dividends to your defense, not being well rested when they're on the field and not being on the field so much. Aaron Glenn seems really respected in the coaches community, and maybe it is because of that aggressive brand of defense, right? Where you're pretty reliant on blitzing and forcing takeaways. But I just in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking like the Lions' defense is always kind of their Achilles heel, right? Like the games they lose, it always seems to be a game where they allow like 40 or 50 points. So like I get it, but then like I just had that reservation in the back of my mind where it's like, is this like the guy you want going forward? But then again, it's like everyone in the football community, the NFL circles seem to be like, hey, this is a pretty good hire for the Jets. So what could possibly go wrong, right? I think you made some good points too. Like I think the draft class is weak, and anybody in this quarterback draft class that is worth taking will be gone by the time the Jets are, able to draft. Like I don't see Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders falling anywhere to where the Jets could take them,
No way.
and taking anybody else would definitely be a reach. So I agree there. Moving on, the next hire is Pete Carroll to the Raiders. He was previously out of coaching for one season. He took a season off, but Raiders, Antonio Brown is out. Pete Carroll is in. Do you have any thoughts there?
Confusion. That I really didn't understand this move at all, to be quite honest. And it's not a knock on Pete Carroll. He's got a really solid history, got a good track record. The Raiders are a disaster right now. I don't know why you would want that job in the first place. Like I'm surprised that he came out of being out of football to coach the Raiders. I don't even know what their plan is. I mean, they obviously need a quarterback. They need a lot of help everywhere. So I don't really know what he's getting himself into, but it's probably not going to be a very fun couple of years for him, at least in the beginning. I don't hate the fit. It just, I don't know. It just took me off guard. Like I didn't expect that to be what happened. And, I don't have any negative feelings towards it, but I have some reservations. It'll be there. There's just nothing to work with there right now. So I don't know that he is going to make that significant of an impact over, quite honestly, probably the next 3 years. So however long he ends up lasting there, I just don't know what his situation is going to be.
Yeah, I think they're going to try to get Russell Wilson on the team, right? I mean, Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson have had, I don't know, damn near a decade of experience working together. So I think that is part of the reason why the Raiders decided to go that direction, because you landing Russell Wilson, despite any limitations he's had the last couple of seasons, it's exponentially better than anybody they've got on their roster. I mean, the Raiders were surprisingly competitive for how bad their quarterback situation is. It was a revolving door between Aiden O'Connell. How he's an NFL quarterback, I'm not really sure. I'm sure he's a good guy. He's super competitive. He's out there trying. It's not like, for lack of effort or anything. He's just not talented. You have Jimmy Garoppolo. Tried playing him last year. I think he ended up getting hurt, but even if he didn't, that probably would have been a disaster regardless. Gardner Minshew, right? That didn't work either. He's probably at best a backup quarterback, and he's had success being a backup, or playing a couple of games like with the Eagles and the Colts and the Jags. And then Desmond Ridder kind of got a second chance there, and that didn't look very good either. So I think the whole purpose of that was to make signing Russell Wilson an attractive offer. I don't know if that's going to work or not. I'm not entirely sure what the Steelers are going to end up doing with their quarterback situation, because being honest here, for them, long term, I feel like neither Justin Fields nor Russell Wilson are their ideal choice. Because very similarly to the Raiders, it seemed like you got a little bit of a spark for a couple of weeks after you switched, and then it was kind of back to that same lethargic offense that the Steelers have had the last couple of seasons. So I think they need a long-term fix too. I don't see either of those quarterbacks sitting there. I think the Steelers are probably going to sign somebody in free agency. Who it is, I'm not really sure. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at this hire. Like maybe we can solve a quarterback issue by, attracting Russell Wilson to come to Las Vegas. But I guess we will see how that one plays out. I don't see like a huge difference between Pete Carroll and, Antonio Pierce outside of that reason either. It didn't seem like you gained anything tremendous, like, from coaching style or, added like players coach versus, a locker room vibe kind of thing. I'm not really sure. That one was a little strange to me too. And like I think you said it too, like what makes him want to take that job? Because that's a project. Like the Raiders are a project for sure. Next one up is Brian Schottenheimer for the Cowboys. He was their OC this past season. Mike McCarthy is out. Destination unknown. Thoughts on that, Will?
I think it's always good to keep your head coach in-house if you can. Obviously, they like him within the organization. He was an analyst in 2022 and then an offensive coordinator in 23-24. So it's good to keep him around. That's also a team that the direction of the team is kind of confusing right now. I think there's a lot of unknowns around it. You still have CeeDee Lamb, who's one of the best receivers in football, but like who knows what's going to happen there. I think this one makes a lot of sense just because he's in-house. I don't really have any qualms with it. They're just a team that has never like broken the seal. And so I think their hope is that Schottenheimer can put something together and potentially break the seal, and keeping him in-house might be the best move for that.
Yeah, this is kind of a weird scenario for me because like I kind of objectively look at the Cowboys and be like, what's like the real root of their problem? I don't really want to say that Mike McCarthy was entirely the issue there, right? Like outside of certain plays down the stretch where his coaching led them to poor results, like not last year, but the year before against the 49ers, that quarterback scramble and trying to clock it with 16 seconds left, like that's a coaching thing. That's an insane thing to attempt to do. And then you don't even get the clock stopped. The playoff game with the Packers last year, that was coaching. You just weren't prepared. They got waxed. Like from the wire to wire, it was the Packers. That's coaching. But like outside of that, I feel like all of their shortcomings are from Dak Prescott, obviously. I think there is a perception in Dallas that Dak Prescott is like a franchise quarterback. And I think most of the fans watching, or most of the people watching, have the correct assessment of it and are like, yeah, he's a little overrated. Like he's at best above average. He just is. Like I don't think he's anything special. But I think the front office is a detriment of that team. Jerry Jones is very involved in the roster decisions. I believe he's the GM as well as the owner. If he's not, he might as well be, because whatever he wants, he gets, right? It's his team. And I don't think the Cowboys are going to go anywhere until that stops. Not so much, he sells the team or he finally croaks and it's over. It's just he's a micromanager, and like it was 30 years ago when he bought that team and won championships. Right? It was in the early 90s. It's not working. Like you had a type A alpha coach with, Bill Parcells and Jimmy Johnson. Those are the reasons why you won those championships. It wasn't because of you, Jerry Jones, intervening. It's like he needs to take a step back and let the organization run itself. That's how I feel, but it's his baby. He's never going to do that. So I think they're kind of just going to be stuck in purgatory until that clicks for him. I don't think any hire is going to drastically change that, because like I don't think Schottenheimer's a bad hire at all. It's hard to like critique the offense because, Dak was being out and some personnel things like aren't ideal, right? I feel like their O-line is still okay. CeeDee Lamb is fantastic. No one's saying anything about that. But you have Rico Dowdle, who had a solid season, mostly due to his usage rate and just being exponentially better than your running back 2 and Zeke. But outside of CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson, who did not have a very good year, not really through any fault of his own, I would say. I mean, he had a concussion for a couple of weeks, but like Cooper Rush was playing quarterback most of the season. That's not ideal. But outside of those two, who do you really have to throw the ball to? You know what I mean? What's his name? Turpin? Who's that other guy? Tolbert? Like, those aren't guys that you want getting a bulk of your targets. So, like, I feel like it's a roster thing with them this year anyways. Years past, maybe not so much. But I don't know if you going a drastically different direction or keeping your coaching hire in-house is going to make a big difference until the micromanaging stops. I think you need to let the team kind of take care of the team, and he needs to just take a backseat. But he's never going to do that. That's kind of why they're in this boat, because he won't do that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. Last up, we got Liam Cohen to the Jags, the former Tampa Bay offensive coordinator. I like this fit a lot, actually. I think Trevor Lawrence's struggles have come not due from talent, and I don't think that he's necessarily worse than we maybe expected after his first couple of years. I think a lot of it has to do with the play calling and the offensive scheme. They finally have some good receivers in-house. Brian Thomas Jr. led all rookie receivers. And I think Liam Cohen is going to make some really good strides with Trevor Lawrence. And I mean, we saw what he did with Baker the last couple of years. So I actually have a lot of confidence in this pick. And they were pretty quick to bring him on. And I think the general consensus is, like, I think Jags fans are really happy about it. I think they should be. I think you actually have something to get excited about. I think you're going to see Trevor Lawrence kind of get back into form. I don't necessarily think that he is a top 5 quarterback in the league like he showed those first couple of years where he was just insane. But he certainly isn't, the 20th best quarterback in the league like he's shown the last couple of years. So I think he's going to find that middle ground and settle into a good career there. And now that they're finally building pieces around him, I'm hoping that Trevor Lawrence takes that step, unless I'm just grossly wrong about him. But I think this is a really, really solid hire for the Jags.
Yeah, I think so too. Just kind of the body of work in Tampa is what really sticks out to me. Like, Baker Mayfield has become one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the league, and he definitely is help, right? Like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are still there. Cade Otton's emerged as a really capable tight end. Even some of those younger talented receivers that the Bucs had, like Jalen McMillan, guys like that, have really taken a step up. But what's most impressive to me about kind of the transformation of the Buccaneers offense is their run game. I mean, I think they were damn near dead last in running the ball, if not dead last, in 2023 and the couple of years prior. Having Rashad White and Bucky Irving in that backfield, and the way that they were able to use the running backs in the passing game as well, is kind of what really transformed that offense. And if you're a Jags fan, you should be really excited for that hire, because like you said, I don't think the Jags' issue was their talentless offense, right? Like, they have pieces to throw to. Like, that wasn't the issue. It was play calling a lot and scheme and things like that. And you have to kind of throw away that Urban Meyer year. That was a disaster for everybody involved. But like Doug Peterson, that first year, they took a really big step forward, and it's kind of, been at a standstill, or, they've taken a step back this year. So I think they're going to kind of get back to that year that they had when they beat the Chargers. Did they beat the Chargers in that playoff game? Yeah, they're going to go. I think they're going to take a good step forward this year. I like that hire as well.
And I think you're going to see a lot more production from Travis Etienne, who
he took a big step back.
Yeah, with Tank Bigsby taking a step up and taking a lot of those carries. But I think now you have like a solidified good running back room between the two. I think that's going to be a huge piece of the offense too for next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Jacksonville fans have a pretty good reason to be excited for the year upcoming. I think that was all of the new hires from the last couple of days. I don't think we missed any. If we did, I'm sure we'll find it by the time the next hire comes out, because there still are a few more vacancies. Like the Saints need to hire somebody, I believe. And I had 5 written down. It's not saying that someone's going to go a different direction, but I think we're just waiting on the Saints opening. All right. If there's no other football thoughts, let's transition into Baseball Hall of Fame. So, it was Tuesday night, right?
I didn't look. Honestly, I don't remember.
Didn't look. Yeah, I don't think it matters. It's kind of an irrelevant point there. But Monday or Tuesday night, whatever night it was, the Baseball Writers elected 3 new members of the Baseball Hall of Fame: Sabathia, Ichiro Suzuki, and Billy Wagner. What are your thoughts on those 3 being elected?
I think they got it 100% right. I think
Almost.
Billy Wagner has been deserving for a long time, so I'm really happy that he got in. He actually kind of snuck in. He had 82% of the vote. You need 80. But he's one of the best closers ever, so it would have been unrightful to not get him in. Ichiro, the whole talk of the town. Who's the one writer that didn't vote for him? We'll never find out. In my opinion, all people who vote, every writer who votes should have to publish their ballot. I think you should have to.
I agree 100%. Yeah.
And a lot of them do, but I think you should have to say, this is who I voted for.
Yeah, the ones who do
I at least
want to
know why. I want to know why. I want to know if it was like I don't want him to be majority kind of thing, or I don't want him to be unanimous because the vibe or the purity of whatever you want to call it. Or if he actually had a reason that said, I don't believe that he should be in on his first ballot, which I would disagree with entirely. And I know this can't count towards him, but I always like to think like we got him in the MLB at 27, which,
old.
we missed a good portion of his prime. Like we got, 27, your prime is, I'll just call it till you're 31 in baseball. And we missed out on those years from, even if he came over at 23, like we missed out on potentially 5 years of watching him in his prime, even more. And he would have been even better. The fact that he still got 3,000 hits despite coming over at 27, completely deserving of a unanimous vote, in my opinion. And Sabathia is also another guy that I believe was fully deserving. I think he had a huge impact everywhere he went, from Cleveland with his short stint in Milwaukee. I just wrote an article about how I believe that was the best trade deadline acquisition in this decade. I mean, he took that Brewers team. He threw 7 complete games with the Brewers in the second half of the season, took him to the playoffs. And I know they didn't win a World Series or anything, but one of the most impactful half seasons that someone has ever had in a location. And then he was just fantastic with the Yankees in the tail end of his career. The singular Cy Young, he had some MVP votes. He had a lot of years where he was in the Cy Young talks. Very deserving, in my opinion. Slightly surprised that he was first ballot. I don't know that I would have anticipated that coming in, but I certainly thought he would be, second or third. So also happy for CC Sabathia getting in. I think it's well deserved for the stretch of just pure dominance he had over a significant portion of time.
Right. So let me unpack this each player, right? Billy Wagner, one of the best closers of all time, obviously. Not so much for, save statistics or whatever, but just like pure dominance. The guy was a lefty, threw over 100 miles an hour, and it was damn near unhittable most of the time. So him being in there, rightly deserved. I'm glad they finally got that addressed, right? Like closers and relievers in general, I feel like are very underrepresented in the Hall of Fame discussion, just because like the typical metrics you would look at for a pitcher, right? Like innings pitched, which is going to be kind of transitioning in our opinion. We'll get into that in a little bit. But strikeouts, things like that. It's hard to look at a relief pitcher the same way just because they don't have the same body of work, the same volume. But they have a high game impact, obviously. So it's good to see him get represented in that way. Ichiro, I think you made a really good point. Like 27, he came to the MLB. He had over 1,000 hits in Japan. Like, incredible player. And I agree. I think the writers who get the luxury of voting on these things should have to disclose who they voted for and maybe why. Like, it is insane to me when you look at the entire ballot for this year that you would have a qualm about voting for Ichiro. There are not 9 other players on this ballot that you should be like, oh, this is his last chance to get in. I'm going to vote for him. Like, just look at the ballot, right? You looked at it. Beltran, Andrew Jones are the only 2 on there, and A-Rod, and maybe Manny, that are like slam dunks to me, right? Andy Pettit, I think, should be a Hall of Famer, but there's debates about that we're going to get into shortly. But you just go down the list of people on this ballot. There's no one that should be replacing Ichiro, whether or not it's his first year or his 10th year on the ballot. Like, him not being unanimous is crazy to me. The guy hit 300 like at every point of his career outside of the first month or something, first 2 weeks. I mean, you know that stat. Is that true? I believe it is.
Yeah, I can't remember what it is, but it's something similar to that, or something to that effect.
Like,
where,
300
never a stretch where he dropped below 300.
Yeah, in a league today where no one hits 300 for the most part. Like, I mean, 0.5% of the league might hit 300 for a season. He did it for his whole career. It's insane. So, what's going on? Who is the one idiot who didn't vote for that guy? CC Sabathia, I did not realize he had that dominant of like statistics his entire career. I knew he was a home run trade for the Brewers from the Yankees in that 2011 you said?
2008.
2008. Okay. Got the year wrong. Just mix up their couple years of relevancy because the Brewers are, a poverty franchise, but different discussion for a different day. But I did not realize he had the career statistics that good, like 250 wins, 3,000 strikeouts. I guess I was just ignorant to that fact. I was like, that's kind of a fringe case. Looked it up. Nope, just slam dunk, Hall of Fame. I wouldn't think he'd be a first ballot either. I would say like 3 or 4, but that was before I looked into it. So I don't think they nominated or chose anyone that was undeserving by any stretch of the imagination. I think they got the 3 right. But the Ichiro one really makes me angry. Like, they did it to Jeter. They did it to Griffey Jr. They did it to Maddox. Like, what are you grandstanding on, Like, these guys are slam dunk Hall of Famers, and you're, like, playing a ticky-tack, oh, you can't be unanimous because we don't do that. We're baseball. And I guess we can kind of transition to your thoughts on the whole process maybe, or things that you think could be done differently.
Yeah, and to your point with who did you vote for instead? I'm all for the small hall approach. If that's your approach, that's your
100%.
approach.
Yeah, it
I
should
don't think
be an
the voters should
exclusive
have
club.
to use all 10 votes. But if you were somebody that says, I vote for one player every single year, and you didn't vote for Ichiro, I would be really curious to know who you voted for instead. And if you told me Billy Wagner because he got snubbed for so many years, I would potentially accept that. But I would be really, really, really intrigued to know the reasoning behind not voting for him, even if you are a small hall guy. Because in my opinion, if you are a small hall guy, your 2 votes this year probably would have been Ichiro and Billy Wagner.
Yeah. Like, CC Sabathia has 9 more years on the ballot. Like, him not being a first ballot Hall of Famer wouldn't have made anybody super angry, I don't think.
No, if that was your true approach and you're, a small hall purist, which is totally fine, you're entitled to that. I'm kind of about that. I don't think you should have to use, nor do I think you should use all 10 every single year. But if that is your approach, I need to know why. And I would like to know who, just because I want to know the reasoning. So there's definitely there's a lot of question marks about the process just because of those things alone. I mean, there could be some sort of bias or, whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. I would just be really curious to know why.
Right. And it's also like, I think that's a great point, especially it's because of like who gets to decide, right? Like, why is some journalist who spent most of his time watching baseball in the 70s and 80s be like the one thing that determines who's worthy when they're living in a relic of the past, right? Like, baseball has changed dramatically over the last 50 years. It's like exponentially changing. Baseball, like, of all the sports, I feel like baseball has changed the most, not like outside of like the physical attributes of the players, right? Like football. Take football, for example. In the 60s, guys didn't even lift weights. Like weightlifting for football became prevalent in like the 70s and 80s, and like some guys were doing it. And now it's like, if you don't, you're not going to make it, right? So football, like schemes change, styles change, theories change, all that stuff, right? Rules change here and there, but like largely the players are like the same, right? Baseball, it's just like everything's different, you know what I mean? Guys throw 100 miles an hour regularly. Like who does it? What starting pitcher? There's some, right? Don't top out at 100, but like a relief pitcher, what reliever doesn't throw over 100 miles an hour anymore? I feel like it's commonplace, right? Basketball, same thing, right? Styles change, emphasis on 3-pointers change, shit like that. But for the most part, basketball is largely the same game. Hockey, they're just bigger and faster. It's baseball is just so different than it was 50 years ago. And I feel like you have to update you have to kind of update the thought process you go through when electing someone to the Hall of Fame like that. You said it should be exclusive. I agree with that. Baseball has the most professional athletes out of the 4 major sports in their history. It's just so many. Baseball's been around for so long, so many guys play on a team. I agree. It should be exclusive. And we're going to touch on it in a few minutes, but like these upcoming classes are very, very, very diluted. Like to your point, I don't think you should have to use all 10 votes. I agree with that because in these upcoming classes, there are not 10 worthy people. They're just not.
No.
Fact. It's just true. There's not 10 worthy players. But what makes you want to be like, oh, I'm going to make an example of this particular player so he's not unanimous? Like, it makes no sense to me anyways, but I don't know.
And to your point, like talking about some of the guys who we think are slam dunks, like A-Rod and even Manny can be in that conversation, and Pettit has a good case. The PED stuff, it seems like, is starting to take a shift. But in my opinion, if you don't put Bonds in, somebody like A-Rod will never get in. Like Bonds is not in. So in what scenario is A-Rod going to get? He has to more than double his vote. He had 30%, 37% of the vote this year. Needs over 80. He's got to double that. I think, and there's no knock with being a PED purist. There's plenty of writers that are like that. There's plenty of fans that are like that. But if you don't think he's worthy because of that, then that's just going to be it. And I think his statistics outweigh that. But somebody like Bonds not getting in, if he isn't in, none of those guys with any sort of PED scandals around them will ever get in. And I think that needs to change because we talked about it pre-show. Like Barry Bonds is the greatest hitter ever.
7 MVPs.
No, with no questions asked. Like there will never be a better hitter than him. I mean, there might be eventually, but I don't think in my lifetime.
Yeah, right. And like you can even take the weird examples, like the stat games you can play with Barry Bonds, right? Like Barry Bonds could have not had a hit in that 2001, 2004 season, whatever it was, and he'd have like the highest OBP in the league.
Yeah, he still would have led the league in
yeah, like the stat games you can play with Barry Bonds are insane. So I agree with that. Like, if you're not going to let the king of that era in, like, I don't think anyone has a real compelling case, even though the steroid guys are kind of off the ballot or the last few stragglers are coming off of the ballot, right? But Andy Pettit, 4 World Series, you know what I mean? Gamer, like one of the best postseason players in baseball history. To me, I think you and I differ on this a little bit, but like, essentially, Cooperstown is a museum, right? It's telling a story of your game. It's a history of your game. The guys that took a part in revitalizing your game when it was dying should be included in that story, good, bad, or indifferent, in my opinion. Like, and if you disagree with that piece of it, I don't have any qualms with that, right? Like, you knocking Sammy Sosa or Mark McGwire for using steroids, like, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I just disagree. Like, I think those guys should be in, not only because of the things they did on the field, but also because of their impact they had to baseball as a whole. Like, very deserving to me. Cork bats, steroids, whatever, right? Like, I'm willing to cast that aside. And I think a lot of people agree with me too. I don't think that's a unique stance whatsoever. You're telling your story. They're a part of the game. Whether it was good or it's bad, that's up for you to decide. But like, it happened. They should be included in that because essentially that's what it is. It's a museum of your game. And yeah, Barry Bonds not being included in there really makes that hard to open the door for everyone else. Pete Rose is another example. He passed away this past year, and he's going to be in the Hall of Fame eventually. The guy leads the league all time in at-bats, hits, doubles, missed wagers, right? Like, he's I would not say Pete Rose is the best hitter of all time, but he's definitely a top 10 hitter just with the longevity, right? And the World Series with the Big Red Machine, all that stuff. Like, influential player, monumental player in baseball history, and you're excluding him because of something he did off the field. And I don't know, like, there's people who do bad things and get, you think every player in the NFL Hall of Fame is a saint? Look at Ray Lewis. We don't need to get into that, but look at Ray Lewis. If he played baseball, he'd be like, "Oh, you were associated with that. We're not letting you in our exclusive Hall of Fame." So, like, to me, I don't mind the exclusivity piece of it, but I think we need to get voters that are more in tune with how most of the fan base feels. And I think if you were to ask fans 10 years ago, they would have more of a purist approach to whether the steroid guy should be in the Hall of Fame. You ask them now, I think most people, I'd say 3/4 of fans, think that they should be in the Hall of Fame. All of the ones that are worthy. Not all of them, but, if you were associated with that, I feel like enough time has passed where most people are like, yeah, these guys should probably be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, especially Bonds. Like, I think the perception around him has changed a lot over probably the last 10 years.
Especially him.
Yeah. Like, I think general consensus within the baseball world is that he was the greatest hitter on planet Earth.
Yeah, if not top 3. Like, there's only a couple of other people you can have a realistic debate about it with.
Yeah.
And Ted Williams is one of them. Ted Williams played in the 40s. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I think it's changed a lot. And I think those are people that are going to be eventually pushed into the Hall of Fame once the process has changed and enough time has passed, which I don't have a problem with that. I don't like the 10 years and you have no chance right now. Like, I do like the exclusivity. It keeps people that aren't deserving in the Hall of Fame, but I feel like there needs to be a way to vote for people that the fans feel worthy without the fans voting, because the fans voting would ruin it. Like, a Brewers fan would vote for any Brewer that they liked, or you get what I'm saying. Like, it would totally water down the process.
Look what happened to the All-Star game. All-Star game is meaningless now.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like you need to find a middle ground between like the pure old-fashioned purist and a complete fan vote. Like, the voters need to kind of have a presence or an understanding of what the general consensus around that certain player is. Not for everybody, but for the people that, like, you've kind of excluded from your process because of one reason or another. Like, look at gambling. Gambling's legal, and Pete Rose is, like, still being barred from the Hall of Fame because he missed his window. You're telling me people didn't gamble on baseball 40 years ago? Yeah, they did. They just did it illegally. You know what I mean? Bill Mazeroski's in the Hall of Fame. What did that guy do? You're telling me Babe Ruth didn't have some beers during Prohibition? That's illegal. You're going to keep him out of the Hall of Fame? Like, the virtue signaling with it, I think, needs to go away. I guess that's probably a good way of putting it is like your principles are different. They're from 50 years ago. Like, let it go. And it's going to take these writers not being physically able to fill out a ballot for that to change, unfortunately. But like Pete Rose should have seen that in his lifetime, and it's kind of sad that he didn't. But it's just kind of the way it shook out. But I think we both agree on that piece of it. I think we've touched on it enough. So kind of taking the things that we just talked about, let's apply it to the 2026 draft class. And I have it pulled up, and I will read it out loud for you and for the listeners. So the 2026 Baseball Hall of Fame ballot, the potential newcomers: Ryan Braun, Shin-Soo Choo, Edwin Encarnacion, who should be in a Hall of Fame just for his home run celebration alone, Gio Gonzalez, Alex Gordon, Cole Hamels, Kelvin Herrera, Matt Kemp, Howie Kendrick, Jason Kipnis, Nick Markakis, Daniel Murphy, Hunter Pence, Rick Porcello, Jeff Samardzija, probably a better football player, Edinson Volquez, and Matt Wieters. I look at this and I see exactly 0 players I would put in the Hall of Fame. What say you?
1,000%. And we discussed this pre-show. There are probably only 2 players that will be on the ballot in 2027 that even have a small case, and those 2 would be Cole Hamels and Ryan Braun. And I don't believe that either of them are close to being Hall of Fame, in my opinion. Ryan Braun is not going to get the votes for the PED stuff. If you recall, we also got to talk about this pre-show. When Ryan Braun, when that whole stuff came out about the PEDs, the perception in Milwaukee completely changed. I mean, people hated him when that happened. People were burning jerseys at Miller Park. You know, that whole thing flipped just a handful of years ago. He became well liked within the organization again. You know, he's spent his whole career here. There's something to be said for that. But that alone is probably going to keep him out, but the stats don't do it either. And people might look at, you know, he has an MVP. It's a fraudulent MVP. Matt Kemp was better in every single statistical category than Ryan Braun in 2011, outside of the amount of hits they had. Very similar to the Jose Altuve MVP in 2017 against Aaron Judge. Just an incorrect MVP voting there. So I even kind of throw that out the window because it's an MVP with an asterisk to me. And with the PEDs, like, I don't think he stands a chance at getting in. Having said that, I think he's one of the very few guys that probably gets a second round of this group. And Cole Hamels was just never entirely dominant to where he'll ever be a Hall of Famer. He was a very solid pitcher for a very long time with a couple of outlier years. And he's got a couple championships under his belt, so there's something to be said for that. But no Cy Youngs, nothing like that. And he's kind of the last of the guys that we're going to see getting on the ballot with the big innings counts. And we kind of talked about this pre-show, like the goalpost for what we consider, you know, a lot of innings for MLB pitchers is about to drastically change. You know, before we talk about, oh, he had 3,000 innings. That's about to go away entirely. There are going to be very, very few guys that have that 3,000 inning mark. And the ones that will are 100% first ballot guys like Verlander and Kershaw. So
like, Verlander, Kershaw, Scherzer.
Yeah, so like throw those guys out the window because they're the exception to the rule at this point. But you're about to see that change, and the guy I want to bring up because of that is Felix Hernandez, who I didn't think was first ballot, but I think he is absolutely a Hall of Famer. He had 2,700, he had 2,400 Ks, and he was just absolutely dominant for about a 7-year stretch from 2009 to 2015. He was one of the best pitchers on the face of the planet with a Cy Young under his belt as well. No championships, which might knock him, but he was one of the best to do it for a very long time. So I think that he is going to be one of the guys that gets in next year on the 2026 ballot as a repeat. It'll be a second year on the ballot. I will not be surprised at all if he gets in. Carlos Beltran should get in next year, as should Andrew Jones. Andrew Jones will have his 9th year on the ballot next year. And Andrew Jones, I think, is a slam dunk candidate. I was actually surprised he didn't get in this year, but I think there's no way that he doesn't get in.
Yeah, I think Andrew Jones really kind of revolutionized the way we expect center fielders to play. You know, like good defense and the ability to have a power bat, right? And him not getting in was surprising. Same with Carlos Beltran. How many years was he on the ballot?
Last year was or this year was his third.
Okay, so like I don't think he was a first ballot Hall of Famer, but like him being fourth or fifth or sixth is probably okay. Andrew Jones is I'm surprised to see that as ninth, and being on pretty good Braves teams for most of his career too is a little surprising to me. But I would expect those two to be in next year. And to your point, this is like what we talked about, right? There's no reason to use all 10 of your votes, especially as the guys on the ballot this year start to roll off. Like those 7th, 8th, 9th year guys begin to roll off. It's like you don't need to use all of them because I read you the list. There is no reason to put Matt Wieters on there. Like most of those guys will be on the ballot 1 year and they're not going to get any votes, and that's going to be it for them, and rightfully so. Like we talked about this pre-show as well, right? Like Ryan Braun's stats are comparable, very comparable to Lance Berkman's. Lance Berkman was on the ballot 1 year, and I would say Lance Berkman was a much better player than Ryan Braun. Maybe not at his peak, right, with asterisks, but 50 home runs or whatever, right? But very comparable, about 350 career home runs, a little less than 2,000 hits, roughly the same amount of games played. So yeah, I just don't see the necessity of using all 10, like I said, I'm all for keeping it exclusive. And what you said about the pitchers is going to be the same for the hitters too, because I feel like the home run argument is going to carry a little less weight, even though it's like a guy like Giancarlo Stanton, 500 career home runs, but he's a career 250 hitter. I think it like the entire metrics of how we analyze hitters are going to change. Pitchers more so, just because pitching is totally different now. Not so much in like how pitching works, of course, but like the practice of how they're used in a game throughout a season, right? So, any other thoughts on that?
I do want to bring up one more because this is a guy that actually got a good chunk of the votes, and I don't think he's going to get in, despite being, in my opinion, Hall of Very Good. It's Chase Utley. Chase Utley nearly got 40% of the vote this year. I don't personally think that he is a Hall of Famer, but what we were talking about with this voting system is that, I don't know if this is the truth or not, but I would imagine that there are a portion of writers that believe that it is their duty to use all 10 of their votes because they have it. And my fear would be is that in such a weak incoming class, it might open the window for a guy like Utley to get voted in. Because when I look at this list, I mean, you and I talked about Beltran and Jones. We'll definitely there's two. And then, you're still going to get your big portion of guys that are not the PED purists that vote for A-Rod, who I think should be in, but won't for obvious reasons. And then other than that, it's like who else Bobby Abreu, I think, has a case. Manny's going to be in his 10th year, but he's on the PED list too. So probably not there. Same with Pettit. And then you got Felix, who I think will probably end up getting in next year just because of the lack
By
of
default,
choices. Yeah. And my thing with Utley is, and I'm a big Pedroia guy. He's a 299 hitter over his career, got cut short because of injury, and more specifically injury caused by another player, mostly that Manny Machado slide. And I think you can't put in Utley without putting in Pedroia. I think they're really, really comparable other than some longevity stuff. And it's really hard for me to say that one has a better case than the other than just a couple of years of playing. Pedroia played 1,500 games. Utley played 1,900. Other than that, the stats are pretty comparable across the board, other than Pedroia has an MVP. And I don't think you can put in one without the other. And in the same vein, I don't think you can put in either. I wouldn't put in either personally.
No, I wouldn't either.
So my thing with the whole voting system is that maybe over the next year, we see somebody who maybe is not as deserving get in just for lack of choices. which I don't know if that's going to be the case. I could be talking out of my ass right now and I'll look like an idiot in 12 months when those guys get the same portion of votes, but it's just an inkling that I have. This class had a lot of solid players in it from top to bottom. And even guys like David Wright, who are, not Hall of Fame, but very good players and, had very good careers on and off the field. Like he's going to be on the ballot again next year. He'll probably stay on again just because who else are you going to vote for? I mean, are you going to vote for David Wright or are you going to vote for Howie Kendrick?
No.
Not even the same caliber of player.
No. The
it's
only thing that
different.
Howie Kendrick has going for him are the 2 World Series.
Yeah.
Or the World Series. I think it was 2, right? Yeah. That's all they have going for them. And I think the World Series wins is something important to consider, right? Because that's like, the pinnacle of your sport. But I think winning a World Series in baseball means a little less than like winning a Super Bowl in the NFL or winning the NBA Finals or a Stanley Cup. I think that's way different. I think like the impact of one is the same, but I think in baseball you can kind of look past, hey, this guy didn't have any postseason success because like there's just more elements to the game. Yeah, exactly.
Felix Hernandez is going to be a perfect example of that.
Yeah, I don't think you need that World Series to, like that's a requirement. Like look at some of the Cubs Hall of Famers they've had over the years, like Ron Santo or Ernie Banks or Ryan Sandberg or anyone else. Fergie Jenkins, they didn't win World Series with their teams, and like they're in the Hall of Fame, right? So like baseball, I feel like is that one sport where it's like, hey, you don't need the championships, but the personal accolades should be there too. It's not just statistics driven because the statistics can be kind of manipulated in a way to argue whatever you like, but I think you need some of those personal accolades too. Cy Youngs, MVPs, batting titles, things like that. Those are important too. Kind of, I think those weigh.
Yeah, I think those weigh a lot heavier in baseball, which is why when you look at a guy like Cole Hamels, and he's got no Cy Youngs, it's really hard to give him a case because it basically says you are not the best pitcher in your league any given year, regardless of how good you were over the course of your career. And a really interesting one actually is the argument for Curt Schilling, because Curt Schilling finished second in Cy Young voting 3 times, 2 of which, when he was in Arizona, were behind his own teammate and Randy Johnson, who was the best pitcher on the face of the planet. So like that would be an exception to where you look at that and you're like, okay, any other year, or if he's in the other league, he wins the Cy Young, but you're behind Randy Johnson. So no chance. Obviously Curt Schilling is has his own things about him. He's got a lot of political stuff about him.
He is by no means making himself any more likable.
No, but just from a statistics standpoint, from an award standpoint, like those things hold a lot of weight, but not without context either, which is why I brought up Ryan Braun, because Ryan Braun is going to end up having some sort of case because you say there's an MVP there. Like there's something to be said for that. Go look at the MVP. He shouldn't have gotten that MVP. He should have 0 MVPs. So. And that doesn't mean that I think Matt Kemp gets in with an MVP, because I don't believe Matt Kemp is a Hall of Famer by any stretch. He was really, really good with the Dodgers for 4 years. And that was kind of it. He aged out pretty quick and a well-liked guy, really respected within the Dodgers organization, but he's not a Hall of Famer. So, when it comes down to it, and I know they're different caliber players, Braun was better over the span of the career, all that stuff. But if Braun didn't have an MVP, I don't even think there would be a conversation, with the PED stuff. And if he didn't have an MVP, I really don't think that there's a conversation to be had. But that MVP is probably going to weigh a little bit more in the eyes of voters. And I don't think it should.
Yeah, I think he'll stick around, like you said, but do I really think he gets in the way these guys vote right now? No, probably not.
I don't think he should anyways.
But I don't think he should either. But
yeah, I just think we're at a point, and you brought up something that I like a lot, is that the way that we view hitters specifically has to change. Like, you and I talked about Juan Soto he maybe won't ever hit over 300, but in today's baseball, 280 is the new 300. So like these goalposts have to change for what we expect. And same with, I know the 500 argument is a big thing because Stanton is one of the only active players that's really close to it. And he's still not that close. He still would probably have to have 5 successful years to hit that. And, he's a guy that never stays on the field. So it's hard to even imagine that he hits 500.
Mm-hmm.
But if Stanton hits the 500 mark, people are talking like it's no questions asked. He's in the Hall of Fame.
There's questions asked. Yeah.
I entirely disagree. Yeah, I completely disagree with that premise, and the two guys that you and I mentioned between Beltran and Jones were really close to the 500 mark and didn't hit it, but they had so much other stuff to their game that it's like no-brainers for both of them.
Yeah, I mean, Beltran being a switch hitter was one piece of it, and Andrew, to my knowledge, like Andrew Jones kind of set the pace for like outfielders today, like being able to really hit power outside of the corners. I mean, he played center and right field, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like it kind of just he proved
Mostly
it.
center,
like you can be an all-around player. Like you can play good defense and hit still too. Hit for power. Like Ichiro played right field, but he had a fucking cannon and oodles of hits, but like never hit for pop. Like Andrew Jones kind of changed that, I feel like. I mean, perhaps there were others. I'm not saying like, Reggie Jackson played right field, how many home runs, but like all around, like the 5-tool outfielder is Andrew Jones.
Yeah, absolutely. And with some of that award stuff that you and I were talking about, like Andrew Jones never had an MVP. Carlos Beltran never had an MVP. So that's why when those guys that have lesser stats and, there's benchmarks that people have kind of thrown out there for what your WAR should be, what your JAWS should be to be eligible to get in as a hitter. Like the MVP weighs into that. So if you have an MVP, like you can get away with having lesser of those things. So guys like Braun have an actual chance, but in my opinion, they shouldn't just because of the MVP, and I think what you said about championships makes complete sense because I'm sure there's a laundry list of Hall of Famers without championships. So that piece doesn't weigh into it as much.
Yeah, if you played for the Red Sox from the 1920s to 2004, or you played for the Cubs from 1908 to 2016, like I named 4 of them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there could be a couple more. Like I think Sammy Sosa should be in Hall of Fame. More so for, like looking past the steroid thing, just his impact on baseball, saved baseball. Anytime you see a 9/11 tribute, you see George Bush throwing out the first pitch at Yankee Stadium, and you see Sammy Sosa running the track with the American flag. People love that stuff. And I think writers should be a little more in tune with, how the public perceives them as well. It's not all about the writer's opinion, I think. I think the general consensus should be included as well, but not to the point where the fans are deciding.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we see what happens in the All-Star game. You and I just talked about Francisco Lindor not making the All-Star game last year.
Which is insane. He wins the MVP if it's not for Shohei Ohtani by a mile. Like he probably had the best season of his career. And that was a guy that took a lot of slander, not out of like personal dislike. It's just because he got this huge contract and Frankie Smiles wasn't living up to that. And I think everybody was pretty happy for him having a good year, like finally putting it all together. It's one of the best defensive shortstops in the league, and he finally got that swing back too from both sides of the plate. So I can't think of anybody who is not happy for him unless you're like a Yankees fan or something. So been running an hour. Any other thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
That's all I got.
All right. Be sure to follow us at Overdue Sports on X. And as you've seen, we've got the Substack going. We're going to kind of build up that catalog with some written pieces. Podcasts will be on there too. So feel free. Actually, don't feel free. Please do subscribe. Just subscribe to our Substack. You'll get email notifications of every blog we write or every podcast we do. And any other thoughts there, Will, before I wrap this thing up?
Nothing.
All right, we'll be dropping this bad boy on Wednesday, and thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time. Peace.